And viewing public, welcome to this meeting of the Birmingham Sandwell Joint Health Scrutiny Committee. May I remind members that the meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast by the Council Meeting YouTube site. And members of the press and public may record and take photographs, except where there are confidential or exempt items. Can I remind officers and guests joining on Teams to please keep their cameras and microphones off unless speaking, and please use the raise hand button if they wish to speak. And then for officers and guests in the room, please speak directly into the microphones to ensure that the live streaming is clearly audible. And I'm not sure the microphones. It's your single microphone right. So there we go. Apologies. Can I ask both members and scrutiny officers if there have been any apologies for the meeting? And I've got apologies so far from councillors Singh, Gill, Smith, Bishop. Any additional ones? Declaration of interest. Can I ask members if they have any declarations of interest to make at this point? Okay. Number 4 is the minutes. We need to approve the minutes from the meeting held on the 4th of November 2021. So I just wanted to check with members if they're happy to approve those, if they've got any issues to raise before I go on to a resolution from that meeting, which I want to update people on. Okay, thank you for that. And that's regarding the solid tumour service from Sandwell and West Birmingham. A briefing note was submitted to the informal meeting that the committee held on the 24th of February 2022. That was a while ago, so I've asked for that to be resent, which I think people have probably had today. The scrutiny officers have asked for a further written update and indication of when the information will be available for circulation, because it's obviously been a considerable period of time since the initial update was requested. And once we get this will be circulated as a briefing note. So people happy with that, we'll move on to agenda item 5, which is the committee's terms of reference, which is to confirm and consider an update in terms of reference for the use of the year 2022-2023. And Fiona also here will do an introduction of that item, which is item 5 in the packs.
Thank you, Chair. This is just a very simple update to the terms of reference following the Health and Social Care Act 2022 that established the integrated care systems, integrated care boards and partnerships. So it really is just an update to the reference. So there's a reference to CCG commissioning groups. It references the new NHS arrangements. So it's a very straightforward, update at this stage. There may be further updates once the health scrutiny guidance is published later on, but I felt it's important in the first instance to get the terminology and names right. And then the committee may want to consider further updates later on. So members are happy to agree with the amendments that are highlighted in new text on the pack that's shown. I think that's relatively straightforward. Happy to agree with that.
I think so. I think it's just 2 alterations, isn't it? There's one on section 1.1 and a further one on section 3.1. And as Fiona says, they're both fairly minimal. If people are happy, we can agree those later on. So thank you for that. Which brings us on to item 6, which is the acute care model. And we've got Liam Kennedy from Midland Metropolitan University, and you're the hospital delivery director. Okay, and you're going to update us members on the ongoing work to transform clinical services ahead of the opening of New Midland Met. Could I ask in terms of the minute take that people actually introduce themselves before they actually speak? So over to you for that.
Thank you. So I'm Liam Kennedy. I was the Chief Operating Officer at Sandwell West Birmingham. I've transitioned across to the delivery director for the new hospital. So it's part of my previous portfolio, but now sort of focusing 100% on the delivery of clinical services into the new hospital. So I'm going to give you a sort of a 5-10 minute overview of the transformation that we're making moving into the new hospital, and then open it up to give you an opportunity to ask questions. I'm sure there'll be lots off the back of what I'm going to present. I guess to start, it's worth noting this is a significant opportunity and catalyst within both Sandwell and Birmingham. this is the largest hospital being built currently in the country, and the Liverpool hospital has just opened, which was in line with ours. So this is a huge opportunity, and what we're trying to do with Midland Metropolitan is more than just the hospital. We're transforming our community services, we're reaching into primary care, and we're expanding and looking at doing regeneration work around the hospital as well, so that we're looking at how we can help the economy around there and trying to work on a wider scale. So the hospital is in theory a building, but what we're doing in terms of transforming our clinical services and the wider impact, it goes far beyond what the hospital is there for brick and mortar. So just to run through a few items that are changing within the hospital. So as you can see from this side, you've got a brief around what the hospital will look like. So we'll have dedicated children's emergency unit and an adult emergency unit, much like we've got at the two sides, but this will be state-of-the-art and brand new facilities. We'll also have 50% side rooms within the hospital, which would be lovely if we'd have had that before the COVID pandemic arrived. But we will have that in the new hospital, which would be brilliant, and it helps with any infectious diseases and separating out and keeping patients safe. And some of the other areas there, we will have our operating theatres for emergency and major planned surgery, midwife unit, as well as neonates, sickle cell and thalassemia. So some of the changes and the models that we're going to have within the new hospital. So we're going to run a full 7-day service, which may sound bizarre to people, because people assume that hospitals are 7 days, and they do run 7 days, but there isn't an equity across all 7 days. So at the moment, Monday to Friday, we have enhanced services, and at the weekend we run weekend services, if you like, which are enough for the emergency admissions, but they're not quite what you would expect from a full 7-day service. So when we move into the new hospital, we'll be running true 7-day services. So any day of the week you arrive, you'll get the same care arrangements. We'll have senior doctors 7 days leading those clinical expert teams, and we'll make sure that we've got dedicated, timely diagnostics for patients when they arrive. So we've got turnaround times that we're profiling into the new hospital, which will mean things like stroke, CT to stroke will be direct access. MRI will be within 30 minutes if you're in the ED department. So much enhanced model of diagnostics and clinical treatment for patients. And the whole layout of the hospital is different. It's been designed with patient groups around our winter garden. So that's a outdoor-indoor area for people to be able to go and walk around. It's sheltered from wind and rain, but it's got a garden, it's got plants. It feels like a nice outdoor environment. There are kitchens within some of the ward areas where people can go and help and support themselves. So it gives them that feel of rehabilitation within the hospital environment. The wards are all designed dementia friendly, and it helps from an ease of access. There's only 3 towers, if you will, and each of those has got a level. So it's really easy from a wayfinding perspective for patients. So that's what's within the new hospital. If we just move on to the next slide. So these, again, some of the areas that I've just mentioned around the dementia friendly, the colour, the layout is all designed to help patients and visitors being able to navigate around the hospital and ensure we get the best possible outcomes and experience for patients. In terms of our future model of care then, the new hospital, Midland Metropolitan, will host all of our emergency services. So any emergency patients attending will go to MMUH. If it's a planned diagnostic or a planned outpatients or planned day case surgery, they will remain at the Sandwell Treatment Centre and the City Treatment Centre. So anything from a day case, local provision, outpatients, day case diagnostics, they will remain there. Any emergency presentations will no longer go to Sandwell City, they will go to MMUH, which I'm sure you're aware from the original consultation of business case, but I thought it'd be worth stressing that again, because it's been a while, I think, since we presented some of these clinical models because of COVID and other items. There will also be a 24/7 urgent treatment centre which remains at the Sandwell site. So if people have minor ailments, illnesses, there is a 24/7 urgent treatment centre at the Sandwell site. What I'm going to do is there's 12 major transformations that we're doing in terms of our clinical services. So if we just scroll down a few slides, I'm going to take you through them. Number 1, keep going, one more. Okay, so The transformation that we're trying to do is broken into 5 categories. So unnecessary attendance is prevented. We want people to attend if they don't need to. And then anybody who doesn't need admitting, we're trying to also avoid that. So wrap around front door services so we don't admit people that don't need to. Then those who are admitted, we're trying to reduce their length of stay and then help with prompt discharges and readmissions reduced. We carry on going. And then this is our sort of roadmap over the next 2 years in terms of transforming and testing the transformation and then getting ready for the opening of Midland Met, which is going to be in spring 2024. So if we focus in, we can go down about 2 more slides. Well, that's it. So these are the 12 transformations. I'll call them out because it's quite hard probably to read, but you've had them in the pack. So the major transformations that we're making in terms of MMUH, so the 2 EDs are going to merge into 1 ED, which will be at the new hospital. So the current City ED and the Sandwell ED, that will merge into 1 ED department. And that will help with our triaging, our processes, standardisation. So it will all be operated through 1 area, which will help bring economies of scale. We'll also have a same-day emergency care department, which just sits behind the ED, which effectively is those patients who need slightly longer than they would do in an ED. So they may need some IV, they may need time for observations. They'll go into the same-day emergency care department. And the idea is that they won't be admitted into the hospital. They will remain within that department and then discharged that day. So again, we've got 2 of those currently. The estate that they sit on is not great. They're quite small units in both the hospitals. So moving them into the new hospital will allow us to expand that space and have a much higher throughput of patients in there. So we can receive on-the-day diagnostics, on-the-day medications, and then on-the-day discharges with any support packages that we need to. Another real focus for us is older people and frailty. So of our Sandwell population, over 65% of those that are admitted into the hospital are over 65. So numbers tally quite nicely there. And it's really important. There's a whole program of work that we're doing around avoiding those admissions, and then if they do come to the hospital, how we can wrap around services in that same day emergency care department to make sure that they can go home the same day. You may not be aware, but when if people over the age of 65 are admitted into hospital, there's something called hospital frailty disorder, which is effectively a decline in their function while they're in hospital, linked to the surroundings that they're in. They become malnourished, they become dehydrated, and that snowball effect means that they could then be anywhere between 6 and 12 days within the hospital, where in reality we should be able to treat them on the same day and get them back to their own home in their own environment, which is a much better pathway. And that's all that work is going in ahead of moving into Midland Met, so that when we are in Midland Met, we don't see that that issue that we've currently got and it's being seen across the whole NHS at the moment. So a lot of work being done. Stroke decoupling. So at the moment, our stroke acute, so if you have a stroke, you go to Sandwell and your treatment is the emergency stroke treatment. Following that, you then have stroke rehabilitation. So a lot of people need help walking again, talking, lots of rehab that goes on. What we're doing with the new hospital is the acute stroke will remain within MMUH. So you go there if you have a stroke, and then your rehabilitation will be at the Sandwell Treatment Centre. So a much more sort of purpose-built rehabilitation facility. So there's a movement there between what's currently at Sandwell and it's been split between 2 sites. Cardiology, we're moving a lot of our pathways in cardiology out of acute hospital and out into community. So things such as heart failure and when patients need daily IVs, which are salines and different medications that they get through intravenous to their veins, that'll move out to a community setting rather than the acute setting. So the moment they stay in hospital for 7 days and they get daily treatments, actually we'll discharge them home and we'll work with our community teams, which we've right size now, to be able to deliver that in patient's own home or within one of the community locations. So there's a big change in terms of the way that we operate in cardiology. Our therapy teams have been enhanced. So previously we ran a 5-day therapy with weekend skeleton shift, which was to intervene for those patients who are deemed most urgent. We've now right-sized our therapy model, which will be complete by about March 23, which will allow us to meet the demands of all patients who require therapy So that's a big change in our therapy provision. Again, that's pre MMUH, so that when we move into the new hospital, that is already up and running. Our imaging department then will move from 2 sites, which is at City and Sandwell, to 3. So they'll operate City, Sandwell, and in the new hospital and MMUH. But what we're also doing is decreasing the amount of time it takes to get an imaging and a report done. So you know what your diagnostic tells you, so you can make a quick decision clinically and then move on in your pathway of care. Endoscopy, again, is moving from 2 sites to 3. But what we're also doing in endoscopy at the moment is changing the way that we work. There are 2 treatments that we are now piloting. One is called transnasal endoscopy and one is called patchal endoscopy. Both of them are really non-invasive procedures. So previously you've had to go in for an endoscopy in a theatre environment. These are done through the nose, down into the stomach, in an outpatient environment, 20 minutes. You don't have to prep for theatre, you don't have to get dressed, you don't have to wait in afterwards. It's a much less invasive procedure. So we're doing both of those at the moment. We've just started the pilot for them, and over the next 3 to 6 months, we'll be increasing our number that go through those procedures. Again, that means a reduction in demand on the acute hospital, and they'll be done within the City and Sandwell models. Our place partnerships, so probably aware within West Birmingham and within Sandwell, we now have place-based partnerships, which effectively is a partnership of the social care, third party, the acute hospital, community providers, primary care. And again, a lot of work's being done in there where we're moving funding away from the acute hospital out into community, out into social care to manage demand and capacity where we see the deficit at the moment. That's a big step from previously what NHS and sort of wider providers used to do. It used to be very much a siloed operation of here's our funding and this is what we're going to do within our sphere of influence. Now we're working across multiple organisations to change the way that we operate that's best for patients. So there's a lot of work going on in both of those. And we have to make sure that the work is done within them, because the hospital is a hospital. But if we change something in the hospital, we're effectively just shifting the problem to another part of the holistic care pathway. So if we don't do it all in tandem, we're really just going to create a bottleneck or a problem elsewhere. So that's a really important facet in the 12 transformations we're doing. Theatres and enhanced care, again, these are just developments in terms of where we're going to operate and how we're going to look after patients post operation. So there's a bit of organisation development going on within those 2 areas just to make sure they can amend and change the way that they operate in the new hospital. So there are major transformations that we're doing. Other services are going under minor transformations, nothing fundamental. A lot of them are just moving from one site into the new hospital. Some are changing hours slightly and things like that. But they're the major transformations that we're doing. And what we've done whilst we've done them is we have used evidence-based and national research to say, are these the best models of care that are currently out there? And then we've asked national bodies such as GERF and NHSE to come in and assess our models and tell us their view on how they think that we operate. So they're the major transformations that we're making. And the next slide down just shows you some of the engagement that we've done with those changes. So how we've gone out and spoke to people and sort of involved clinical evidence-based patient and then public engagement. Just to give you a feel for, this isn't something we're doing in isolation. We are making sure each step of the process, and again, like today, we're out talking to people to explain what we're doing and then allow them to ask questions and challenge on how we work. And the next few slides basically reiterate a bit about the transformation, and then they give you some patient stories as well, which are quite stark in terms of the difference between what we currently deliver and what we deliver, or we're going to deliver in the future. So if you could just scroll down to about 3 slides, one more, sorry. Yeah, there. So this is an example, and this is a really typical example within the hospital. So I'll just highlight this, and then I'll pause and allow questions. But this is a very, very common example of what happens in the hospital at the moment, and actually happened to one of my neighbours very, very recently. So 76-year-old admitted in with a fall and then was concerns regarding coping at home. She sustained a fracture in her arm, and that fracture was managed in ED, and she was referred on to the medicine department. and she was awaiting medical parking. She actually spent nearly 9 hours within the ED department, which I think we all admit is not a good environment for someone who just had a fall and slightly concerned. So a very, very similar patient. Obviously, we don't do randomised control trials within the NHS. That would be ethically unfair, but very similar patient came in. Exactly the same situation, apart from the fracture was on the other side of the arm. And the intervention in the green box is what we've done now in our transformation of care. So they went to the Frailty same day emergency care facility. Their fracture clinic appointment was followed up the next day. The therapy assessment was undertook on the day, and a package of care was arranged, which is a 4 times package of care arrangement. There was a foot health referral, a key safe where they can access their property was arranged, and they were discharged home. They spent 3 hours within the Frailty estate while all of that sort of wraparound holistic experience was done. So that's quite different from 9 hours in ED without any intervention waiting to go to medicine, to your whole holistic treatment plan being arranged and organised and dates set out within a 3 hour time period. So that's one of the changes, and trying to reiterate how that will affect patients. So that's just a quick overview. Obviously, there is more information in the pack, but I just wanted to highlight the sort of major transformations we're making with the new hospital and what it will mean to patients. And I'll pause there.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. Questions, Councillor Jones?
Your intervention there that you do now, have you got like a multidisciplinary team?
Yeah. So the Frailty SDEC includes
social workers.
Yeah, so the Frailty actual element, so there's 2 different compartments. We've got an integrated front door now, which includes wider partners, so third party, social care, and the acute hospital, and that's where the package of care element was arranged. In the actual Frailty SDEC, it's more around the therapists, the ACPs, so enhanced clinical practitioners and consultants, and they do the sort of clinical wraparound, and then they liaise with the social care and other split wraparound. So yeah, much improved.
Thank you, Chair. It all sounds rather promising, but I remember similar stories being told when the Elizabeth Hospital was the new hospital there was built. So what lessons have been learned from that experience? Because I understand that various teething issues when it eventually didn't come online.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of it is true. All sorts of stuff about not being included in the original design.
Yeah.
The capacity issue being the obvious one. I still think they're using the old site now because it just wasn't big enough to meet demand. So given that the pressures on emergency care, particularly at the moment, are we confident that this new hospital will meet future demand, or are we going to have a situation where we might have to review it again in the future?
Yeah, some really good questions. So I'll take each one. So lessons learned. So Kevin Bolger, who was the Chief Operating Officer when the QE moved, is a strategic advisor on our MMUH programme board. So very much given us this is what we did wrong, this is what we did wrong. So we're definitely ensuring that whatever moves or issues happen with the QE and they reflected on, we've got the sort of front steer on them. So we won't be making the same mistakes that they made. We may be making new or different mistakes, but we've certainly covered off the aspect of anything that they learn and sort of evaluated afterwards. Kevin's there to make sure that we don't do that. So we've thought about that. We also have the new hospital programme team that are a national team that have recently been set up to oversee the development of the new hospitals. And they're in Liverpool at the moment in an intensive evaluation piece. And after that, they've given us the sort of write-up of lessons learned from that. So a more recent example of issues. In terms of the demand capacity, we've done a whole series of simulation modelling that looks at all different levels of activity and demand. So we refresh that on a monthly basis to look at what's our activity through ED, what's our admission type, and how does that split across all of our different catchment areas. And what we are seeing at the moment is the work that we're doing in the Sandwell place is having a major impact in terms of our attendances, admissions, and length of stay for Sandwell patients. What we're not seeing yet is the impact from a Birmingham and West Birmingham perspective. So we're actually seeing a significant increase in activity and admissions from Birmingham and West Birmingham, which is probably as a repercussion of what the pressure that the QE in Heartlands is under. So our modelling and data suggests we're doing what we thought we would, but at the moment we're only doing it within our Sandwell place. And what we need to do is make sure that we work with our partners across in Birmingham and West Birmingham, because otherwise all that happens is we'll tackle our problem and we'll keep our demand capacity as it should be and the flow will work. and we'll just see the movement of patients come across because there's no flow and capacity within the Birmingham and West Birmingham region. So it's not something, again, we can just solve in isolation. So yes, I can assure you that the modelling and demand capacity from our side looks good, and it is tracking where we would expect to refresh it monthly. That's not to say, though, that we won't see a huge increase in activity move across the border because of the issues within Birmingham and West Birmingham. So that's something on our risk profile very, very high, and we're working with David Melbourne and Jonathan Button to sort of see how we can work together to amend that.
Thanks, Charles.
Yeah, and went and visited the site not long ago, and it looks as if it's going to be fantastic. My biggest fear is, and we're going to get the staff to staff it the levels we need.
So in terms of staff increase, there's about there's 484 more staff members that we need based on our models of care that we've said we will run. We are a quarter of the way through our recruitment journey to MMUH, and we're a quarter of the way through the numbers that we need to just recruit over 100 additional. So from that perspective, our recruitment is working well. It is going to be a challenge, and within the NHS, one of our biggest challenges is recruitment, especially in some of the really difficult areas where the national market isn't there. So radiographers across the NHS at the moment are really, really challenging, and the acute medical teams are the other really. So they're the two really difficult. The rest of the models we're quite confident we'll recruit to. We don't have any vacancies at a band 5 level in nursing, which is, I think, one of the only organisations in the country that has that position, and that's because of some of the overseas recruitment and development that we've been doing over the last 4 or 5 years. So there are two areas that are going to be difficult, and what we've done is we've got deviated models of care that if we have to, when we open the door, we can switch to different models. They give effectively the same throughput and outcome that we need, but slight deviation, and we've risk assessed those. And one of them includes, so for radiographers, it includes working with our 2 strategic partners in a more integrated way, which will cost us slightly more, but it will deliver the same outcome. So there are ways around it, but it is our biggest risk and biggest challenge is around recruitment, definitely.
Thank you.
Okay, right. No other questions. I've got a couple of observations. Firstly, I think I'm really impressed by the way you set the system so the actual patients move around in separate lanes, etc., to what visitors do. So I think from when I've had family members in hospital, it can be really personally embarrassing for people to be moved around in that way. So I think that's real positive. The dementia-friendly environment, where do you get advice from in terms of what to incorporate into that? Be able to let me know.
Yeah, so we've got a specific dementia team within the hospital who worked back in at the design of the hospital to try and set it up so it was in line with that good practice. Things have actually changed and moved on since the hospital was first designed. So through the work that Jane's been doing and is carrying on doing with particular patient groups and support groups, we're hoping that things like our wayfinding, something that really takes account of different patients' needs, those with dementia, but also those with other kind of communication needs and difficulties. I'm not sure it will be a kind of perfect environment. I'm not sure hospitals are ever that kind of perfect, but we're certainly making sure that we do what we can. And the original design is very strong on that. I think one of the particular benefits is about the amount of light that there will be in the building that people have had the opportunity to visit. We'll certainly recognise that. So the single ensuite rooms have got huge picture windows, but every room and every area has an outside view. And for people who are very disorientating, I'm sure you'll understand. But realising the difference between day and night is really important. Sometimes in hospitals we're not able to that. So that's certainly one aspect that we've been facilitating.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of the sickle cell centre you've got there, what sort of geographic area will that cover?
I don't think I know that exactly.
That's the regional facilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant square.
No.
Oh, right.
I was trying to think
Sorry,
about-
yeah.
Sorry, let's go.
Don't mean the square footage.
Yeah.
I meant you have to know it.
No.
I meant in terms of across the country. Is it West Midlands? Is it
Yes,
Birmingham?
it's the West
Regional
Midlands.
centre.
Yeah, so it's regional centre, but we are one of the few sort of regional centres, and we do have some national services that will sit within that as well. So yeah, it's the regional centre.
And the other point was in terms of the example you flagged up of the 76-year-old lady. I was looking in terms of your acute therapies, you're looking to extend the working hours for those. I'm just wondering, say, if you're going on one particular day and you get assessed, how quickly is that therapy going to start when you actually get back into the community? Because I know with some people I've dealt with, that's been problematic. They've been given some initial advice, and then there may be a short, or in some cases a prolonged period of time before the actual therapy actually kicks into gear.
Yeah, so I think that's a really fair challenge, and that is how it exists now in certain. I think where the difference is for us, because we are an integrated organisation, we run community, we actually run primary care now, we run community, acute and primary. So from a Sandwell perspective, it is seamless because we operate across the three, and this is the differential that I was talking about earlier between the different places. In West Birmingham, it isn't as seamless because you're right, we do the initial assessment from the therapist, we then refer them into Birmingham Community Healthcare Therapy team, and then it depends on their workload, demand, capacity when they pick that up. Generally speaking, it is within the defined period. If that defined period is suitable, is a different question, but it's within their defined period. So if it's an urgent intervention to stop readmission, it will be within the first 48 hours. If it's more of a planned element, it will be within the sort of 6-week window, which obviously sometimes could be deemed too long and could mean that they'll need further intervention at an acute hospital because of that length of time. But that's the two differences, and that's what by the time we move to MMUH, we want to have solved that, so that regardless of where you live, your experience and your pathway is exactly the same. That's a big piece of work that we're undertaking across 2 different ICBs, 2 different places that we need to do.
And I think you said you're looking to be fully open in 24.
Spring 24, yeah.
Yeah, and how quickly do you envisage you'll be fully operational once you've actually opened?
So spring 24 will be fully operational. So from handover, the building hands over in 23. So it'll be, at the moment, it's profiled end of October 23. We've then got a commissioning period, which is obviously we need to go in and make sure there's no snags, all the oxygen's working, the electric's working, water flows, etc., etc. So we've got quite a large commissioning period. If you consider, I think Liverpool had a few days and we've got a few months. So it's quite a different scenario. And then once we are happy that the commissioning of the building is ready to go, then in theory, the plan at the moment with our move partner is a 3-week move across of services. So between actually saying, yes, the building's ready, to fully operational both sides onto one with 3 weeks. That's our plan at the moment. It's fluid, it may change, but that is our plan at the moment.
And the last point that Councillor Giles flagged up in terms of having a shortage in terms of specialisms. What sort of contingency plans are you looking to possibly to implement if those actually become problems? I know you're looking to sort of try to resolve those in terms of the recruitment process.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I suspect in terms of certain national shortages, you're competing against hospitals across the country.
Yeah.
So do you have any sort of plans to think, well, we need to be able to get to this particular level, otherwise we're not going to become fully operational? Yeah.
So we would never be not fully operational. So there are mitigations that we can make, like we make now. So our acute medical team, for example, only has 5 substantive of 10 that they're funded for, and then they've got 4 UK locums and an overseas locum to make up that 10. So there is ways of doing it. It's more expensive to run it in that way because the agencies charge a premium, because there isn't the current market out there to recruit. So what we've done, we've partnered, we've got a strategic partner in recruitment, which is the first time we've done this, and it is quite a big investment. Obviously, over the 4 or 5 years, we're hoping the return on that will be significant. But we've partnered with an international recruitment company who are supporting us both in the UK and overseas with all the vacancies that we have. We're doing more of a headhunting approach in terms of the new hospital, because it is quite a draw. It is the largest and flagship nationally at the moment. So to say that you can come and work within this state-of-the-art environment, this is what it offers. We've got education on there, we've got research. So there's a lot more offering now as an organisation than we've had before. It's also a university hospital. We're not a university hospital at the moment. So our recruitment levels at the moment aren't bad. They're not great, but they're not bad. So we're hoping with this strategic partnership, with the appeal of MMUH, we'll be able to get there. Now, we're not stupid. We know that if we don't get there, there has to be mitigations and different ways of working. And as described earlier, from an imaging perspective, we work with two very large outsourced partners who can support us with our imaging as an in-reach. So they provide in-reach staff, or we send our reporting elsewhere. And that's a mitigation that it works. It's not ideal, again, because we'd rather have the staff ourselves, but it does work. So I guess if we don't get there by the time we need to open the door, we've got our other options that are more expensive, but they work. And then over time, because the opening is the opening of the building, the actual transformation that we're making can continue on past that. But yeah, we have got levels that we have to reach. Otherwise, we have to look at all our alternatives, which is like outsourcing strategic partnerships elsewhere.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Is there a risk with the idea of a brand new shiny hospital that there may be, certainly after the initial opening, increased demand because people assuming they'll get a better level of service or care from that hospital compared to others? Has that been factored in? Because I assume after the buzzes will die down, that will subside. But obviously, there may be an initial rush, but certainly if the alternatives are A&Es and other hospitals, particularly Birmingham, the appeal of somewhere brand new shiny, I assume there's going to be a lot of press around the answers of the new hospital, etc. So has that been factored in?
Yeah.
And my other question was in terms of the other complaint of hospitals often get around parking arrangements. Elizabeth is a good example of that, but it's not unique. What are the planned parking arrangements for that? Are you confident they're sufficient to meet demands for staff, but obviously patients and visitors, and not going to impact on the surrounding area? I'm not familiar with the site, so I assume there'll be residential nearby.
Yes.
And I know certainly from ICL planning committee, so with various applications near hospitals, the constant theme throughout all of it is parking issues and travel plans that don't work. So has all that been factored in? Are you confident those will be robust enough to withstand scrutiny?
So I think from the first one, the have we modelled in a shiny new hospital, people want to come and just even have a look around. Yes, we've included so we've looked at other new hospitals that have been opened over the last 5 years and looked at what their increase in activity was over the first. Generally, it's about 3 to 6 months where you see that, and then after that it starts to subside. So yes, we've modelled that in. We've added 5% on, so about 30% increase in our activity through front door during that period. We wouldn't expect that to translate into admissions and bed profile, because generally the people that come that are transferring away from another are those that walk in or those that want to come and see. So they generally don't need to be admitted, but they certainly need to be cared for within the ED. So we factored that in within our modelling, and our sensitivity analysis suggests that is achievable with a slight additional staffing within that first 6 months. We wouldn't be able to sustain it longer term, so we hope that would come back down to the levels that we previously modelled. But yes, we've done that sensitivity analysis, and we're confident that we'll be able to manage that. To your second point, there's a multi-storey car park that sits under the hospital. So in terms of sort of residential parking, etc., hopefully that will account for that. And we've factored in that we've done a mathematical model on it, again using QE as an example, and Kevin's sort of this is what we didn't do right, but it allows something. I think we've got about 15% sensitivity within the increase that we could see. So if we see that 30% increase and they all drive and they all want to park, we may have a slight problem within that first 6 months. However, post that, we think we've got a 15% window, which includes all our staff, patients and their visitors that would come along with them, and that's sort of simultaneously. However, what we are trying to drive on the site, we've got a big offering of electric vehicle points and car parks and facilities for walking and bikes. And we're going to really try and push the bike angle with our carbon net zero and what we're trying to do from a sustainability perspective. The 2 remaining treatment centres will still have their multi-storey car parks, which have recently been built, which provide ample parking now. I love the fact that you can actually drive into hospitals if you move sites any time of the day, and there's ample parking available. So they opened in August last year, and that means that the treatment centres at both Sandwell and City don't have a problem with parking anymore, which is nice. So I think, yes, I wouldn't want to say 100%, but we've thought about that, and we've learnt lessons from previous, and we've allowed a sort of a gap in capacity for the parking.
There is also a transport route that's recently picked up again. It's been a long time been talking about those issues. So it's changing of bus routes so that they come directly onto the hospital site, but also looking at how we join up some of the roads and areas in between. And I think your point about the neighbouring streets is really important because what we want to be a really good neighbour, and we're really conscious that we've got this large hospital in close vicinity to people's homes. And so part of that transport will be looking at the neighbours and what are their wants and needs. And I know from different experiences, having local limited parking for residents, some people like that, some people don't. So it needs to be a solution that really works for the local people, and we're keen to that.
Sorry, my name's James Scott. I lead on the community engagement side, and just to build on that, so we're setting up an MMUH Friends and Neighbours group so that we can get that sort of resident but also local business involvement, so that we can hear firsthand in the build up on the opening of the new hospital any particular problems, so that we can be sort of that good neighbour.
Certainly, I think the risk is because presumably they'll be charging for hospital car parks, which I don't personally have an issue with. You've got to maintain them somehow. But obviously, there's a tendency for people, if there's a free option, they will go for it, even if it's 5-10 minute walk. And therefore, if you've got residential streets where people could park and avoid paying and then visit the hospital, you've got real pressure on residents there. So, because I know it happens in other places, it's a real problem. People visiting the high street because they'll rather park on a free residential road and pay 40 pence per hour or something like that.
So our relationship with the local authority particularly is really important, and we have that as part of partnership working, and they've been part of the discussions with setting up the Friends and Neighbours, so that we get this sort of mutual support, and not just as the hospital trust, but actually the neighbouring local authorities.
It is a good point to think about in terms of the free, especially with the cost of living the way it is at the moment. If people think actually I can get a free parking rather than paying the multi-storey, that's something we do need to think about. We build the spaces for people, but if they want to actually use them and pay for them, that's a different problem, isn't it? So it's good to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I find that people, if there's a free option, they'll go to great lengths to maximise that. It's something you've got to factor in. I assume there'll be some people who will be willing to pay, but it's just something to bear in mind. And then just on the travel plan, because I used to live with an A&E nurse, and they've always been pushed to use public transport or cycle. And they always found that these ideas, that they sound great on paper, but in practice they just don't work. If you've done it, you don't want to cycle, you're exhausted. Quite often buses don't necessarily run at the times when staff are starting or finishing, and it's assuming the buses run on time and punctual. And particularly with the threats to bus services at the moment, where that's potentially going to be even greater risk. It's fine if you live in an area that's frequently served by buses, but if you live in a residential area some distance and that service is under threat, then obviously getting the bus is not an option. Therefore, you have no option but to drive. It's ensuring that we to enable, particularly from staffing recruitment option, I think having that ability to offer that to those who want to. Obviously, there'll always be somebody who wants to cycle, catch the bus, etc. It's just having that option rather than just assuming no, everyone's going to cycle to work. We don't need to write about parking. Sometimes some organisations go down the route of it doesn't work.
I just want to come in. Your engagement, are you meeting with the councillors, the local councillors?
Yeah.
So I had a meeting the other day, and there was a bit.
So particularly around the hospital itself.
Yes.
So on the sort of certainly, so Victoria side at this moment in time, we're meeting with and have met with our chief executives, met with the local councillors in South Victoria. Yeah. We're offering the same opportunity with our colleagues over in sort of Ladywood on that threshold, so that we can start to understand what some of the issues are that some of our colleagues, our councillors are hearing from the constituent.
Yeah. I would say I live in North Edgbaston, just round the corner. And we already get issues with parking from City Hospital, even like half a mile away, which is where I live. So that has to be watched. I also know when the University QE Hospital was being built, there was scant regard for where the buses were going to stop, and the road layout in front of the main thrust into the hospital, which concerns staff, not just potential visitors. So that really has to be sorted out. I also know that there were moves, somebody, perhaps residents, I don't know, who were moving to try and get the number 11 to detour at the end of the City Road or even down Shenstone Road, to just go into the hospital complex campus and then back up the Dudley Road out again. I think sounds nice, doesn't it? But you could have enough buses and maybe even look to subsidising some of the services at some times of the day, which is going to be very, very limited in future. So people, to some extent, got to accept if you use the bus, you may have to change to another bus in order to get to where you want to go, where you want to go. So.
Thank you. Just to sort of build a follow through the what you raised regarding contacting with people that live close by in terms of impacts. I know when JLR moved on to their new site on Castle Bromwich, they put a team out to actually work with residents. And that did help to assuage some of the concerns, because there were some staff members who started off by actually parking on a private road as close to the centre as possible. But one of the things they actually did, I don't know if this is something you want to bear in mind yourself, was people that staff members that car shared, you got a preferential parking spot closer to the end where you actually need to actually get out of.
Yeah. That's something we looked at currently on our existing sites, but absolutely, I think that's a really good suggestion to encourage that.
There's a discount as well.
Yeah.
There's a fee for staff parking, there's a discount for those that do car shares and so forth, as well as an incentive for the cycling as well. But I take your point around long shifts and one of the few idiots who does still, but there are people that will.
I think it's positive of actually having those interactions with people.
And that's absolutely a proposal approach. Absolutely.
It was also nice to hear you was looking to the future as well, like having water taxis. If you get the canal, I mean, it is a way forward.
Yeah.
There is a transport study in Sandwell, Birmingham, and West Birmingham transport study, which actually focuses on canals and over to the important regeneration zone, which we've been part of in my ward, which is Ladywood, at the end of this route, this patch. So that there's work being done there on sustainable, make it easier to walk, easier to cross the road, even to get the bus, you know. So there's a focus on that, and then there's the work to the Dudley Road, Spring Hill, and so on to install cycle paths and so on.
I think that's good because it gives people a range of options in terms of active transport, so I don't have to always but there may be occasions where I feel that's what I actually need to do. Okay, if there's any more questions on the acute care model before we bring Lane back in again to discuss the proposed change to the daycare. Have you got somebody else doing that one?
No, I'll set it off and then I'll invite Jane in who's done the work, so I can't take any credit for it. So I think we came and spoke last time around the fact that since the initial engagement and design of the hospital and the models of care, we then, when we go into the detail, things come up and think actually this would be a better way to operate things. So one of the proposals that we came up with when we were doing the detailed analysis was, in our model, we were going to have day case general surgery across both sites and day case trauma orthopedics across both sites. When we looked at the staffing requirements, the equipment, the efficiency, the policies, processes, it actually made much more sense to locate single site general surgery and trauma orthopedics, they're two of our biggest specialties, into one location. So the proposal that we came up with was that the general surgical would all be located at the Birmingham Treatment Centre, and the trauma orthopedics would all be located at the Sandwell Treatment Centre. And that was based on the demographics. We looked at the hotspots around people that were accessing those services, and the majority of patients that, or slightly more than 50% were for Sandwell trauma orthopedics, and the same for the general surgical at the city site. So that was what we came up with. We benefits from a staffing and cost and efficiency perspective, but obviously the big thing we need to take into consideration is what the patients, what the perception of the patient was for us to do that. So that's when we then went out to consultation around it to talk to patients and gain their feedback. So Jane, can I hand over to you then, if you want to just outline some of the bits?
Sure. I don't know how much you want to know, but we, on the back of the conversation actually with the scrutiny, we went out to conversation, and it was 6 weeks back in March, April time now. We reached out different ways, so we went to a postal survey to 7,700 of our patients we've used our services in the past. We had an in-person meeting, which was a room at Cap Centre in Smethwick, which was standing alone, so over 100 people came and participated in that public meeting with our surgical team. We had an online meeting, because obviously people were still a little bit weary around COVID and sort of coming to public meetings. So that was well attended. And then we work very closely with our voluntary community and faith-based sector organisations about reaching out into communities that are probably not as accessible to us within the NHS. And so we did some very targeted work with some of the communities, so the Chinese community, the visually impaired blind community, deaf, hard of hearing, and then some of our different communities across some of our different cultural sort of communities. So we sort of put the legwork in, if I can use that expression, to get people, first of all, to ask them if they understood why we were making these changes in the context of what Liam has just talked about, the new hospital. I think it's fair to say there was a lot of interest in the new hospital at first, so we had to have that conversation about MMUH before we could move people on to talking about day surgery. The majority of people, I think just under 50% of people said that they understood why we were looking to make the change. They didn't necessarily agree with it. I think that's, different. But they certainly understood why we were making it. The biggest sort of issues in the reports that came out was people were concerned about travel access. So at the minute, if they've got the choice of moving between the two sites, we're now sort of directing them into sites for general surgery and sites for trauma and orthopedics. So the big issue for people was certainly that travel access, transport, and then the inflated costs potentially of taxi fares. Cost of living came into the conversation very clearly, as you can imagine. And so we've taken that forward through our governance process in terms of looking at how we might be able to sort of help with people that may find it very difficult to sort of, if they're in Sandwell and they have to go to City, that's an extra journey, and what we might be able to do about that, working very closely again with our colleagues in the voluntary community sector. We run a great initiative. You might have heard the national franchise called Driving Miss Daisy. Still Morgan Freeman springs to mind when I hear that, but we're looking to build on that so that if people do have problems accessing the sort of the transport to get them to the general facility, then we're looking to enhance and build on the current driving safety scheme that we have with trust. So we are looking for solutions as well as just going ahead with and implementing proposals.
Thank you very much. Question, please.
Driving Miss Daisy, sorry, I'm not seeing to go.
So
voluntary.
It literally is. It's a companion-based service. It's a bus. It's a bright blue car with yellow daisies on it, and people are collected from the hospital and then taken home. So it enhances patient transport services.
And is it used a lot?
I don't know. It's a popular service from the hospital. I couldn't tell you the figures, but it's something that we are looking to extend. I know that.
How many vehicles do you have to have in that scheme?
It's not our scheme. It's something that we run in partnership. So I don't know how many. I don't know whether anybody else knows the sort of the numbers of the vehicles involved. Something we can come back to get.
Just my information. I think that would be really useful.
And how long has it been going? Driving Miss Daisy?
Over a year, isn't it? Over a year. Yeah. And it's been reported on really well from a patient point of view in terms of patient satisfaction, because it means they're not waiting around, so people get help to get from the hospital to their front door and into their living room, supported by other voluntary sector services.
Can I just put two other bits in for context? So At the moment, if you're a patient who meets the criteria for the West Midlands patient transport, you get West Midlands patient transport. So those patients will not be affected. They will still receive West Midlands patient transport. It will just be their site of location. So there's criteria around that as not being able to, not mobile, to be able to leave home, certain disabilities, etc. So there's a set of criteria that we already offer patient transport to. So what we're talking about here with driving stays and other options is above and beyond what is currently offered. The other bit to put into context is we currently direct people to the site where either the specialism is or the wait is shorter. So we already do have a sort of a management of patients. Now, a patient may turn around and say, actually, no, I don't want to. I'd rather wait an extra 4 weeks or 6 weeks, whatever, and go to the site closer to me, which does happen. But we do already work a sort of pseudo split site depending on where the consultant is. So if the consultant's doing a clinic at the City in the morning, we don't bring them to Sandwell to operate. We operate at the City so they remain on one site. And therefore, if that's where they're operating and that's their patient, then the patient goes to that location. So there already is a bit of a split between that. But what we're just now proposing is it's a full, if you need a half full adjudicator on some kind of hand operation or minor trauma feet, you're going to go to Sandwell. Then if you need a general surgery, you're going to go to City. There isn't that option anymore. So it's just to put that into context. It's not a wholesale shift in the way that we operate. It's just sort of moving it on to that next.
I think the other thing to say, Chair, is that that's the surgical aspect of it, the sort of pre-post-op was never going to change that. Yeah. You go and still receive that in Sandwell if that's local to you, or in City if that's local to you. So it's the surgery aspect.
It's just the surgery.
Question then to Coach Moore.
Thank you, Chair. It's probably not so relevant in your case because you're building a brand new shiny hospital. I know traditionally, whenever there's any tinkering hospital services, there's always a panic. It means hospitals have been closed. People get very, very worried. And it's about making sure the information's out there. Because I've often find if you don't put the information out there, they will fill it with something else which you have no control over. So it's best not to have that information vacuum. So I know certainly with UHB, they've had problems in the past where rearranging how services are delivered has meant Good Hope to be shut, for example. I know that was a real concern a few years ago. So I think because you're building a new hospital, I think you've avoided that. So I think just making sure of any kind of future changes is to make sure the information's out there. Because if you don't put it out there, it will be filled with something else and you'll have no control over what people fill it with.
No, you're absolutely right. And Chair, within your presentation pack, you'll see a slide that we put together that talks about where the services are going, where their future is. So what's going into LMUH, what's staying at Sandwell, what's staying at NBC. And we're having lots of community-based conversations around that really, so that we want to get ahead of, as you say, sort of fill that space with factual information.
Any other questions? Could I ask then, in terms of, you obviously give an indication here in section 5, the conversation approach of what you've actually done in terms of engagement. Is that process continuing in terms of, obviously not at that intensely, but you're still continuing to be engaging?
Absolutely, absolutely. So what that's given us, if you take surgery, is that we now have the details of 4,700 people to talk surgery as well as lots of other things. So they're now part of a trust-wide database, and so we engage with them quite regularly. The next one that we're having a conversation around is stroke and cardiology. So we'll start. So we're not waiting for those big formal consultation exercises. This is about having a continuous conversation and sort of an engaging relationship with that are around the new hospital and around our other sites. So we keep the conversation going.
Could I ask in terms of how's that conversation is it online, or was it by telephone, was it face to face?
Combination. What suits people, to be absolutely honest. If there are people that want to have an online conversation, we have an online conversation. Lots of people want to have that face-to-face conversation. So lots of us continue to go out and have conversations with local people, again, through those trusted voices, through those organisations that are at that community level. So I am out almost every day of the week talking, having the time of my life talking to people in different communities across Sandwell and West Birmingham.
Could I ask you then, you've managed to assuage some of their initial concerns, not completely, I suspect, but have they become less less of a worry to people over time as they've listened to what's actually been said to them?
I think so. I think it's the thing about the void, isn't it? You fill it with something if there's nothing, and actually for us it's important to keep that conversation going. And so whether it's something that you're interested in, like surgery as a specialism, or whether you're interested in the new hospital, or whether you're interested in the work of the trust, we can have the conversation that interests people and try and allay their fears really. And the more people engage with us, the more robust the conversation can be. We believe in an honest conversation. And we've always said this, people might not like, and as politicians you know this, people might not like what you've got to tell them, but actually what they do is they appreciate the fact that you're going to have those difficult conversations at times, that honest conversation with them.
And the last point for myself, but 6 on the last page, on page 6, you've got a list of points that you gain to the findings have been reported back to the UH Surgical Board and Clinical Leadership Teams and follow. Do you have any indication in terms of when they'll be telling you what their decisions to those points are going to be?
So that has taken place. So the Surgical Services team took the details of the feedback that we've shared today, and their recommendation, which was accepted, was that they progressed to the 2-site model with specialist services dedicated on Sandwell in City. So the Trust's clinical leadership executive has accepted that on the basis that those elements that are listed in 6.4.6 are further progressed. And on things like communication and information, there's obviously a piece of work we need to do on how we tell people about the outcome of that. But importantly, James is very involved in a piece of work looking at all the communication we give to patients around surgery to make sure that it's legible, easy to understand, people know what the pathways are and have all of the information about where they need to go and what they need to bring with them. So that's the first point. The transport issue we've talked about around the bolstering that community and offering community service for transport. On the basis of that, the Trust Board does want to progress with that recommendation due to that on-site and standard surgery for data.
Yeah. I was thinking in terms of the free parking and the assessment of additional travel costs.
Yeah, so free parking isn't something that we expect to be able to provide. There is already assistance with travel costs through help with health costs. And the additional one with this one is that community facility.
Who administers who gets it? Just get a private company or back to the hospital?
The car parks now are run by a private provider, Q Park. That's relatively recent, only in the last few months of the new car parks open. So they do the charging.
She could go back to the hospital.
We did this to run them, but actually it was running a loss rather than an income.
How do they make a profit then?
We're not in that world. They've built big car parks. We weren't able to do.
Let us down again.
Can I ask you 2 more points? Firstly, in terms of clear signage. I know sometimes when we've finally been visiting people in hospital, often there's lots of signage, but it isn't necessarily easy to work out which bit you need to go to. So I'm just wondering how you sort of got advice in terms of what was effectively a clear signage.
Yeah.
See, did you take some advice in terms of?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we've been doing, again, as part of going out and talking to people about the new hospital, we've been doing some conversations in communities around wayfinding. So we've been talking with people who are blind, partially sighted, people who can't hear, people who've got learning disability, autism, and their families, and just talking through what good signage looks like, what the images should look like, what the colours, print on colour backgrounds, and taking on sort of advice from specialists, really, people who have got that lived experience in that condition. It's all been part of that ongoing conversation.
Thank you for that. And the last point was on page 45, page 1 and 2, where it says that points recommendation 2.3. An implementation plan will be drawn up and that along with the decision and final formally with the new Black Country and West Birmingham Integrated Care Board and the Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Take it that's still going to be happening. Yeah.
We haven't done that yet.
Do you have a time scale on that?
We wanted to come here today to hear what you had to say on the back of the insight that we shared with you. And so we'll take that away, and then what we'll do is that 360 turnkey service. So then we'll start to put a plan together that goes back out to sort of tell people and share with people the insight, and share with people the sort of actions that we're taking on the back of what we've heard.
So you'd be building that on the basis of the information you picked up from today's meeting. Okay, thank you very much for that. Any other questions, members? Can I thank you very much for the presentation? I really appreciate it. It's been really useful, and it seems as though it's going to be a worthwhile project when it's finally fully open. Yeah.
It's a very rare opportunity, I think, in terms of what it offers to that area. There's not many in the country that are getting that investment of the new hospital and the wider reaching. So we're using the hospital as an anchor point, but in theory that's just a building. But everything we're trying to do around that building and in that area in terms of the regeneration, the learning campus, the links with universities, the links with the local schools, the apprentice, the local employment, that's going to make a massive difference to that area. And I think that's something that we should all be sort of working together to focus on and really sort of drive forward.
So you sort of see yourself as being almost as a community hospital.
Absolutely.
You're embedded in that community.
It's going to be run by the community. We're going to employ over 35% of the local community within that hospital. These are all the aims of what that hospital is about, and then helping the regeneration. So
I just urge anybody if they can to go and see it, because it is absolutely out of the world. It's going to be art gallery in there. It's going to be an art gallery. Shops. It's just
we extend
nothing what I
extend the offer. So when you're ready, we arrange it.
As long as this is a visit, it's not a patient.
Either or would be a good experience.
That would be a good experience. Right. I'll just take your word for that. Okay, but thank you very much. We're going to move on now. So, date and time of the next meeting. We normally have these meetings quarterly.
Yes, we do.
And I just wonder whether we want to schedule this next meeting on as and when required, or whether we want to potentially to run them at least every 6 months. And this is it's an open question, possibly including scrutinize in terms of what your opinion would be if you're ready.
Every 6 months, unless they need for
I think one of the key things will be when that implementation plan is, because I think there's a very clear focus for the work this piece, at this stage of IC. So, maybe say 6 months or as and when needed.
Well,
it might be 6 months' time. The implementation plan might be ready in month 7. So we need to wait for the implementation plan before unless there's something else arises that the committee needs to consider.
I think if the implementation plan was ready for 3, I wouldn't want to wait until month 6. But I wouldn't want necessarily to be stretched over more than 6 months between individual meetings.
So I'd say 6 months unless you need to call it out.
Yeah, or as and when needed.
Okay, so we'll look at that. Then 9 is request for calling for petition actions on petitions. Do we have any requests for calling to council? Any other urgent business? We feel you want to express a concern regarding Councillor Giles regarding the potential implications of the election.
No, I haven't. I mean, we haven't discussed it as our scrutiny on.
We were asking questions whether you were going to.
Yeah.
Right.
We brought it to our scrutiny committee on Monday.
I sort of misinterpreted, but I think we asked a question. I think there is an answer as available.
Yeah, shall I pick that up? Thank you.
Yeah.
So, obviously, it's very challenging times, isn't it, in the NHS and many other services. So, in terms of direct impact on our trust, the outcome of the RCN ballot was that it didn't meet the threshold for nurses within our trust to take strike action. We've obviously got other strikes or industrial action ballots coming up, so we're not entirely sure what impact that will have. So we're awaiting RCM, Unison, Unite, and GMB, as well as the VMA, the Doctors Union, to come out. We think the most significant could be Unison because of the number of members at the trust, obviously outside of the RCN. So what we're doing currently is our normal business continuity planning, but obviously taking that to another level so that we can look at all of our services in a lot of detail and understand what the impact would be if strike action was taken. We're working closely with our trade union colleagues to understand what services will be provided. You'll know that there's a commitment to continue with emergency and emergency care. So that obviously means different things, doesn't it, to different people. So once we know the outcome of the ballots that are still outstanding, we'll be able to have a better idea of what services will be directly affected and what won't. So at the moment, that's what we're doing, looking at all our services to understand what the impact is, having good dialogue with staff. Obviously, staff aren't required to tell us whether they're going to take action, but they can choose to if they want to. So we're working closely with colleagues to try and understand that. But at present, we know that the RCN isn't something that will go ahead, I think, for our trust. But I think we can expect that there will be impacts anyway because of neighbouring organisations where nursing staff will be taking strike action.
Thank you. So, one point is authority to chair between three meetings. Obviously, that's not a sport because it will go back to self-next for
Yes,
So I would suggest that possibly for our issue, we just keep in touch with each other and arrange a further meeting at morning.
Yeah.
Thank you all for your time and questions. That's been appreciated.
Yes.